They say Christmas is the season of joy, love, and family. But not every Christmas story ends with gifts under the tree and songs by the fireplace. Some Christmas stories are best left untold. This is one of them. After my last relationship ended, I thought being alone would be peaceful. No more arguments, no more compromises, just me and my space. But as the weeks passed, the quiet started to feel less like peace and more like isolation. That's when I met Sarah. We hit it off instantly. Messaging back and forth felt natural. She was witty, funny, and said she'd been feeling the same holiday loneliness. It didn't take long before she suggested we meet in person. We planned for her to come over on Christmas Eve to decorate the tree together. I'd bought wine, cleaned up the place, and set the mood with Christmas music playing softly from my speakers. It was perfect, or so I thought. When night fell, my phone buzzed with a message. "Hey, I'm outside," smiley face. I'll never forget that message. It felt like the start of something good, but I had no idea how wrong I was. I opened the door to see her standing there. She wore a heavy red coat, snowflakes sprinkled on her hair. She was taller than I expected, at least 6 feet. Her smile was warm but off. Something about it didn't sit right with me. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Beneath the strong wave of cheap perfume was something stale, old, like she'd been wearing that same coat for days without taking it off. "Smells like Christmas in here." "Love it," she said, brushing past me into the living room. She was friendly enough, so I shrugged it off. We sat on the couch, poured some wine, and talked about holiday traditions. It felt normal until it didn't. Something about her felt off. Her smile lingered a little too long. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for something. I tried to brush it off as nerves. After all, meeting someone in person for the first time can be awkward. She asked a lot of questions. Questions about my house, my job, if I lived alone. I joked, "Why? Planning to rob me?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. We opened another bottle of wine, and I started to feel more at ease. Maybe I was overthinking it. She had a rough charm to her, and I figured not everyone is perfectly polished on first impressions. But then I noticed her staring, not at me, but at the framed photo on my bookshelf. It was a picture of me and my ex. Her eyes lingered on it too long. "Old flame?" she asked without turning her head. "Yeah. Old news," I replied quickly. She gave a slow, knowing nod. Funny how people leave things behind. After another glass of wine, we decided to start decorating the tree. I climbed up to the attic to get the Christmas tree box. It was heavier than I remembered. "Need help?" she called up from below. "Yeah, it's a bit much for one person," I said, handing down sections of the tree one by one. When I handed her the final, heaviest section, she took it with ease, far too much ease. I stared for a moment. For someone so slim, she had surprising strength. Back in the living room, we assembled the tree. As I adjusted the branches, I noticed Sarah wasn't helping. She was watching me, just watching. I smiled awkwardly. "You planning to help or just supervise?" "Just watching," she replied, eyes half-lidded. Her tone was flat, not playful, not joking, just flat. Next were the ornaments. I told her they were in the crawl space beneath the stairs. She sat back on the couch and waved her hand. "Go ahead, I'll wait." I was annoyed but didn't say anything. I ducked down and pulled out the bins. As I crouched in the cramped space, I felt off. My head started to feel fuzzy. Maybe it was the wine, I thought. When I came back upstairs, the living room lights were off. "Sarah?" I called out, feeling a twinge of panic. No response. I used my phone flashlight to scan the room. She wasn't on the couch. My heart started to pound. I checked the kitchen, the bathroom, and even the back door. It was locked. I checked every room in the house, calling her name. My chest tightened with every second she didn't answer. Had she left? Did she sneak out? I checked my phone. No new messages. I sent her one. "Where'd you go?" No response. I sat on the couch, trying to calm myself. Maybe she felt uncomfortable and left without saying goodbye. It was rude, but not unheard of. Then I heard it. A creak. It came from upstairs. Slow, steady. Footsteps. I froze. My heart felt like it was in my throat. Someone was upstairs. I crept to the base of the stairs, holding my breath. I listened. No more footsteps, but I could hear breathing. Slow, shallow breathing. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice shaky. Silence. I dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Someone's in my house," I whispered, my eyes locked on the top of the stairs. "Are you in a safe location?" I backed into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. "I'm armed now." A loud thud echoed from upstairs. My chest tightened. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. "Police are on the way," the operator said. I hung up and gripped the knife tighter. Suddenly, footsteps, fast, rushing down the stairs. I braced myself myself, heart racing, knife raised. But no one came down. The house fell silent again. No footsteps, no breathing. I stood there, shaking, listening. I swore I could feel someone watching me. I gathered my courage and slowly went upstairs. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from my phone. I checked the bedroom, empty. The bathroom, empty. I opened the closet and found a coat, a heavy red coat. I bolted downstairs, grabbed my keys, and ran to my car. I didn't stop until I was parked 3 blocks away, heart pounding, eyes darting in every direction. The police called me an hour later. No one was in the house. But when I got home, the red coat was gone. It was Christmas Eve of 1996, a night that still haunts me to this day. I was only 8 years old at the time, and being Jewish, Christmas Eve was just like any other night for us. My dad, a dedicated doctor, was working on call at the hospital, which left my little sister and me alone for the evening. Well, technically, our mom was home, but to be blunt, she was an alcoholic. As an 8-year-old, I didn't understand what alcoholism was. All I knew was that once it got dark, my mom was as good as unconscious. No amount of shaking or yelling could wake her. That night, my sister and I sat in front of the TV, enjoying our usual cartoons, when we heard a knock at the front door. I was the oldest, so naturally, I went to check it out. Our door had glass panes, allowing me to see outside without opening it. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. A man, dressed as Santa Claus, stood on our porch with a large bag slung over his shoulder. When he noticed me peeking through the glass, he smiled wide and waved, motioning for me to open the door. I approached the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and unease. It didn't make sense. Why would Santa be at our house? We weren't even Christian. My little sister watched from behind the couch, her wide eyes filled with both fear and excitement. "Hey kid," the man said in a voice far too friendly. "It's me, Santa. Let me in, and I'll give you your presents." Even at 8, I wasn't that gullible. "Santa's not real," I said flatly. "And besides, we're Jewish. We don't get Christmas presents." His smile faltered, but only for a second. "Of course I'm real," he replied. "And this year, I've decided to give presents to Jewish kids too. Isn't that nice?" His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something about him felt off, very off. I crossed my arms and glared at him. "We already get presents for Hanukkah. We don't need yours," I snapped. The smile vanished from his face entirely, replaced with something colder, harsher. His eyes darkened as he leaned in closer to the glass. "Open the door, kid," he growled. "Right now." Fear gripped me like a vice. "Call 911. I shouted to my sister. She ran for the phone as the man pounded on the door, each thud reverberating through the house like a thunderclap. My sister and I huddled by the phone as she dialed 911, her little fingers trembling over the buttons. When the operator answered, we frantically tried to explain the situation. "There's a man dressed like Santa trying to get in," I cried, my heart thudding like a drum. But the operator didn't understand. "Is this an emergency, children?" she asked, her tone dismissive. 911 is for real emergencies. It is an emergency," I yelled, but it was no use. The operator hung up, thinking we were just kids playing a prank. My sister's eyes filled with tears, and I'll never forget the look of hopelessness on her face. We had no one else to call. No cell phones, no emergency contacts, and our dad was unreachable at the hospital. Minutes passed like hours. I hoped the man had left, but then, another knock. Not gentle like before. It was loud, urgent, and angry. "I know the cops aren't coming," the man's voice echoed from behind the door. "Open up, or you're going to be in big trouble." My sister's sobs grew louder as she bolted upstairs, yelling for our mom. I knew it was pointless. Our mom wouldn't wake up. We were on our own. Panic clouded my mind. What could I do? Then it hit me, the smoke alarm. I'd seen it go off once when mom burned something in the kitchen, and I remembered how quickly the fire department arrived. I grabbed a few candles from our menorah, lit them, and hurried beneath the smoke detector. I waved the candles wildly, sending wisps of smoke into the air. As soon as the detector started its shrill scream, I blew out the flames and tossed the candles aside. "Please work," I whispered to no one in particular. The smoke alarm wailed, its piercing scream filling every corner of the house. My sister came running down, eyes wide with terror. "Fire!" she cried. "No fire," I said, pulling her close. "Just stay here. They'll come." My plan had worked. I tricked the system into calling for help. I glanced at the man through the window. He wasn't running away. He stayed. He paced on the porch, eyes locked on the front door. Within minutes, the blaring sirens of a fire truck echoed down the street. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The man, he didn't run. Instead, he waved frantically at the firefighters, as if he'd been waiting for them. "Thank God you're here," he said, pointing at the door. "My kids are trapped inside. I'm their father." My heart stopped. The firefighters believed him. They were preparing to break down the door. "No," I screamed, pressing my face against the window. "That's not our dad. Our dad's at the hospital." One firefighter paused, staring at me. "That's not your dad?" he asked, his face suddenly skeptical. "We're Jewish," I cried, showing him my kippah. "We don't even celebrate Christmas." My words cut through the chaos, and the firefighter's eyes shifted to the man. Two firefighters approached the man. "Hey, buddy," one of them said firmly. "Why are you trying to break into a Jewish family's home on Christmas Eve?" The man's face twisted into a snarl. He bolted, but he didn't get far. The firefighters tackled him to the ground and restrained him until the police arrived. One officer stayed with us until our dad came home. "I've never seen my dad look so angry." "What if I hadn't been here?" my dad muttered, his voice shaking. I hugged him tighter than I ever had before. To this day, I'm convinced that being Jewish saved our lives that night. If we believed in Santa, even for a second, we might have let him in, and if we had, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. It was December 2022 when my girlfriend Emily and I decided to escape the city for a holiday retreat in the Rockies. We had rented a charming Airbnb that promised a cozy, Christmas-themed experience. It sat on a vast property surrounded by woods, with a breathtaking view of the mountains. The promise of a snowstorm that night added to the festive allure, so we left earlier than planned to gather groceries and settle in before the storm hit. The 4-hour drive from Denver to the cabin was uneventful. We stopped at a small general store for snacks and supplies before heading up the winding, gravel road that led to the property. The cabin stood nestled among towering pines, adorned with glowing Christmas lights, a snowman, and decorative candy canes lining the pathway. A wooden deck wrapped around the cabin, complete with a hot tub, a feature Emily was particularly excited about. The cozy Christmas charm from the pictures online felt even more magical in person. As we carried our luggage inside, the warmth of the cabin enveloped us. A beautifully decorated Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, and stockings hung by the fireplace. The air smelled of wood and pine, adding to the rustic charm. After unpacking, I explored the cabin. It had 3 bedrooms, but we only needed one. There was an upstairs loft with a pool table and a basement that felt cold and unwelcoming. While Emily started prepping dinner, I couldn't resist checking out the basement. It was dimly lit, with exposed beams and old tools hanging on the walls. It felt disconnected from the rest of the cabin, like a place meant for storage rather than relaxation. As I climbed back upstairs, a knock on the front door startled me. I opened the door to find a man in his late 40s standing on the porch. He wore a frayed jacket and a friendly smile. "Evening," he greeted. "I'm Adam. I live just up the road. Thought I'd come by and introduce myself." I thanked him, assuming he was somehow connected to Steve, the Airbnb host. Adam mentioned he and his brother occasionally helped with the property and told us to reach out if we needed anything. His familiarity with us felt unsettling. He knew I was with my girlfriend, even though Emily hadn't come to the door. Still, I brushed it off, assuming Steve had told him about our stay. After Adam left, I locked the door and joined Emily in the kitchen, where the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. After dinner, we decided to try out the hot tub. Snow was already falling steadily, blanketing the deck in a soft white layer. The warm bubbles were a welcome contrast to the cold air, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. That is, until the hot tub suddenly stopped, leaving an eerie silence. Then, we heard it, footsteps crunching in the snow. Emily froze, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, my heart racing. "Should I call out?" I asked, but she shook her head. We stayed silent, listening as the footsteps moved further away. I tried to convince her, and myself, that it was probably just an animal, but deep down, I knew better. Later that night, as we settled into bed, the cabin felt colder. The hot water in the shower had run out after just a couple of minutes, and Steve assured us via text that he'd send someone to check the heater in the morning. Exhausted, we drifted off to sleep until a loud banging on the front door jolted us awake. Emily grabbed my arm, her voice trembling. "Don't answer it," she pleaded. The bangs came again, 3 deafening knocks that echoed through the cabin. We sat frozen, clutching each other in silence until the noise finally stopped. I crept to the bedroom door and locked it, praying that whoever or whatever was outside would leave us alone. The next morning, I ventured outside to clean the snow off our car. That's when I saw them, fresh footprints circling the cabin. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Whoever had been knocking on the door last night had been watching us. As I stood there, Adam appeared from the woods, a shovel slung over his shoulder. I told him about the footprints and the knocks at the door. He shrugged nonchalantly. "There are some odd folks around here," he said, "but they're harmless." His words did little to reassure me. He offered to check the water heater and headed inside, disappearing into the basement. While Adam was in the basement, I texted Steve to let him know someone was already here fixing the heater. Steve's reply made my blood run cold. "Who's there?" I didn't send anyone yet. Panic set in as I realized the truth. Adam wasn't supposed to be there. My hands shook as I grabbed Emily, whispering that we needed to leave immediately. We packed in a frenzy, throwing our belongings into bags and rushing to the car. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Adam emerging from the cabin, his face twisted in a menacing grin. The tires skidded on the icy road as I sped away, my heart pounding. Emily kept looking over her shoulder, as if expecting Adam to follow us. We drove in silence, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. Someone had been watching us, waiting for the right moment, and we had unknowingly let him into our lives. Steve called shortly after, apologizing profusely and promising to involve the police. But his reassurances did little to calm our nerves. The image of Adam's grin was seared into my mind, a chilling reminder of how close we had come to something far worse. Later that evening, Steve updated us. The police had searched the cabin and found evidence of someone living in the basement, blankets, food wrappers, and even a small camping stove. It was clear Adam had been squatting there for weeks, possibly longer. The officers also discovered scratches on the inside of the basement door, as if someone had been trapped or trying to claw their way out. The thought sent shivers down my spine. Who was Adam, really? And what had he been planning? Though we were miles away from the cabin, the fear followed us home. Emily and I couldn't shake the feeling that Adam was still watching us, waiting for another chance. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow outside the window felt like a warning. We tried to move on, but the memories lingered like a dark cloud. The Rockies, once a place of beauty and peace, had become a nightmare we couldn't escape. And though we had left the cabin behind, I knew in my heart that the story wasn't over.